On today's video, we're going to put you on everything you need to know about Plant City, Florida. We're going to start off by the inner city. Now, Plant City has some rough neighborhoods. It may be known for the Strawberry Festival and a beautiful downtown, but Plant City has some rough inner city neighborhoods. It's part of Hillsborough County, which is where the city of Tampa sits. Now, Plant City sits closer to Lakeland along I-4, the traffic corridor of Florida. This area between Tampa and Orlando has some of the heaviest traffic along Interstate 4 that you're going to see anywhere in the United States. Being right next to Lakeland and Polk County, next to Hillsborough County, Tampa area, despite Plant City being a small rural community, it has a lot of influence from larger cities. This area has always been infected with gang activity. The city has a Hispanic, black, and white population. Thus, you have criminal organizations of all types in the city. So don't get it twisted with the fact that it's somewhat of a rural community. There's a lot of real big city stuff happening in Plant City. The term on the other side of the tracks is very real in Plant City, since the black neighborhood sits entirely south of the railroad tracks adjacent to downtown, and there are barely any roads that go north to south across the railroad line. Perhaps since the railroad splits the town evenly, this is for safety, but nonetheless, there are no black populations of any significant number north of the railroad tracks. Despite being in Hillsborough County, Plant City really has a Polk County vibe. It really feels more country than it does city. The African American part of the city seems to have a church on every single corner. And as you guys know, in the state of Florida, possession within 1,000 feet of a church results in an enhancement to criminal charges. This makes it so that most of the African Americans in Plant City that get arrested in their home territory, their African American community, are very likely to be within 1,000 feet of a church, and the same crime that a white person would commit in their community wouldn't come with the criminal enhancements. Most of these churches in the African American community sit vacant, but when an African American gets arrested for a possession charge, chances are he's within 1,000 feet of a church, and whether that church is open or not, you bet those criminal enhancement sticks and sends that person to jail for a lot longer than anybody else in the community. This is a problem that in the state of Florida, most African American communities have. Churches on just about every single corner that seem to never actually have people inside worshiping, but seem to be sending a lot of people to prison for a long time. For the most part, it seems that in a lot of these Florida cities, these churches have done more in sending African Americans to prison for longer than they have in helping their communities improve in any way or another. After all, most of the time, these churches are vacant to begin with. But the criminal enhancements that they bring to the people in their community equal the homeless, the orphaned, and the widow of tomorrow. So because of the presence of these churches, many times when African Americans are arrested in their community, they're going away for a lot longer. If there's one thing that's crazy about Plant City, is the abnormally large amount of churches that are sitting vacant in the heart of the African American community, ensuring that any African American who's caught on any possession charge will get that enhancement. There's also public housing, real housing projects in the heart of Plant City as well. Despite the fact it's kind of a small city, especially the core, it does have public housing, which means that Plant City is really a southern city in many ways, with a lot of things in common with the Deep South. Even though it's kind of in South Central Florida, Plant City really does feel more like a city in North Central Florida than it does a city in South Central Florida. And you know the saying in Florida, the further north you go, the more southern it gets. And Plant City may be kind of close to South Florida, but it really feels like it's closer to the Deep South. With housing projects, the railroad tracks splitting up the town's population, this city doesn't really feel like it's in the southern region of the state. For all general purposes, Plant City really feels like it's closer to the Deep South. Let's take a little ride through the city, and when we hop back into the video, we'll talk a little bit about downtown Plant City. If there's one thing Plant City can brag about, it's having one of the nicest downtowns in the state of Florida, especially for a city its size. And the downtown is the intersection of a few major highways, which gives a more vibrant and busy feel to a small city. Having large highways that intersect in its downtown area, it brings a good steady flow of traffic, and thus, despite Plant City being a small place, it really feels larger and more vibrant because of the volume of traffic that goes through the city. The vast majority of the architecture is very well preserved, giving the town a clean and pristine feeling when you are in the downtown area. Right in downtown is a little sandwich and soup place that sells Cuban sandwiches and other Cuban-infused cuisine or Tampa-infused. Now, when you talk about the cuisine of Plant City, keep in mind that it is in Hillsborough County, and thus it has a lot of Tampa influence. It has a lot of country influence, like there's a buffet called Fred's that serves real, genuine, hearty American food, but you have a combination of Tampa meets country, and this is what really marks the cuisine of Plant City. It's a combination of country, hearty American food meets Cuban, Latin, Tampa cuisine. And even at Fred's Buffet, you're going to see black beans, rice, and plantains incorporated into the country American feel. The cuisine of this area is a combination of Cuban and country American food, and this is a staple of the city that, despite it is far from Tampa, it still soaks in a lot of the food from Tampa, and this is the own staple and brand of Plant City's food scene, a combination of Tampa and hearty American eating. This is Fred's Buffet, and you're going to find good hearty American food as well as a few Tampa infused options. Driving through the city, you'll notice a lot of jacked up trucks. You'll also see a lot of old school cars. You're combining, again, a little bit of the Mexican American car culture with a little bit of the Deep South. So you get a lot of old school trucks and jacked up trucks. If you don't like seeing F-350s and jacked up Silverados every single day, you may not like living in Plant City because people here drive big trucks. Talking about vehicles, this area has very little infrastructure moving north to south and east to west. So during the daytime, despite Plant City being a small town, it has some major big city traffic problems because Tampa and Orlando are some of the most congested districts in the entire state, and Plant City is right in the middle of that mix. So even though it's a small country town with a small country feel, it is still adjacent to two very large, very busy cities. Keep in mind that Orlando, just down the road, 45 miles away, is one of the largest tourist destinations in the world. So this little town can be disrupted with some massive big city traffic. The I-4 corridor is also a very diverse area. Influences from Mexico, Cuba, Brazil, and just about anywhere in Latin America. If you got a problem with hearing people talking French, Spanish, and Portuguese, you may not like this area because it's very diverse. In fact, I noticed spending some time in this city today that even many of the American people who are part of the labor force have to a large degree, speak some type of Spanish if they want to be working in the fields and in the surrounding parts of the city, because much of the labor force here is Hispanic, and many of the Americans that are part of the labor force here know Spanish. It isn't like Miami. Culturally, this area is country, but linguistically, Spanish is an important language. Not like Miami, where the culture has been completely wiped away. This area still preserves its American culture, its American country culture, but Spanish is very important. Today, while I was spending time in this area, I even noticed that many of the Americans know a lot of Spanish because they need it to work. It isn't required like in South Florida, but it will definitely make your life very easy because many of the businesses, establishments, and co-workers are going to be speaking Spanish. This area is heavily influenced by agriculture. And while I'm not a fan of Plant City itself, the core of the city, The surrounding rural areas are some of the most beautiful rural communities in the entirety of the state of Florida. Unfortunately, it's being encroached on by large developments, these cookie cutter communities that are rezoning areas of agriculture and turning them into cookie cutter communities. It's definitely heartbreaking to watch. The most important thing being grown in the outskirts of Plant City is strawberries. In fact, it is home to the Strawberry Festival, which taking place around this time of year, basically starting towards the end of February. But this Strawberry Festival has a catch. Predominantly, no U.S. citizen is going to work picking strawberries. This area is heavily dependent on migrant workers, and there are legal ways to bring migrant workers to the area, but anytime you have a large influx of migrants, you have the open door for people living illegally in your community, a problem that both Hillsborough and Polk County have had to deal with on a large level. For the most part, these farmers understand that no U.S. citizen is going to step foot on any of these fields, and if the state of Florida, for some reason or another, crunches down on legal, illegal, or temporary immigration, whatever form it takes to bring these people here, if these people from other places don't come here, the people from here will not support these industries. And the strawberry, which is profitable for many of the farmers in this area, depends solely on the labor of people from other places. Recently, it's been Mexicans, Hondurans, Salvadorians, many Guatemalans who take the fields. If you have a problem with seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of people from Latin America every single day working in fields within the proximity of your property, this part of Florida may not be for you. I've seen the first administration of Trump, Ron DeSantis' loss, and many other changes come to the state of Florida. And even now, with the strictest set of laws from the state and the federal government, I was just in Plant City and saw thousands of people working in the fields. It doesn't seem like this area is willing to let go of their affordable and exploitable labor force. That again, without it, not many people from the United States are going to touch those fields, and nobody will pay that much for a strawberry to begin with. So this is a problem that this area faces, and it's so endemic to the area that many people are just used or accustomed to the notion that there are a lot of migrant workers in the surrounding area, because after all, agriculture depends on it. Until they invent a robot that can do a Guatemalan's job, this is going to persist in this area. And if you think that these farmers are going to give up their comfortable earnings from agriculture because of political views, you might as well go ahead and check yourself into an insane asylum. They also know that if agriculture fails, big development is at their doorsteps. And regardless of how they feel about migrant workers, there's no doubt about how they feel about big development. After all, agriculture and everything that comes with it is the culture and the lifestyle and the essence of Plant City, Florida. Without that, the city wouldn't really exist. It's the essence of this city. And while changes come and changes go, one thing is persistent, that the only thing saving these fields of beautiful strawberries, which is the essence, culture, just about the life of this town. And I mean that. The people that live here, you'll see decorations of strawberries everywhere you go. People have strawberry stickers on their cars. They feel very profoundly about what the strawberry represents in their community. And they're not going to give that up, knowing that if agriculture were to fail in Florida, the land would be rezoned into single family home development, cookie cutter communities, and that would break the heart of most people who grew up in this area. Nothing hurts more than to see these beautiful fields of strawberries get turned into gated communities, cookie cutter developments. That is the threat that most people in this community would like to never see happen, which is for their beautiful fields of strawberries to be engulfed by urban development. It's already encroaching in a lot of ways, but it hasn't quite taken over yet. It would be a very sad day when these strawberry fields become gated communities like everything else in Florida. And this is coming from somebody who's been to Kentucky, Maine, California, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Amish country. I've seen the beauty of the United States, and I can tell you that these strawberry fields in the outskirts of Plant City are really one of the most beautiful places in the United States. It's a beautiful culture, it's a beautiful scenic area, and all of this really is at risk of immigration policy and urban development. One thing that I really don't like about this area is the backward mindsets of a lot of people. Small towns, small minds. A lot of these people have just kind of grown around Plant City, and this is all they know. And even though they're surrounded by big cities, there really are a lot of people here that are just kind of isolated in their own little bubble, and they haven't really experienced a lot of the outside world. They're the type of people that try to impose their mindsets and viewpoints on other people unwarrantedly and offer opinions about how you're doing your own life when nobody asks them for their thoughts or opinions. It's the type of place where if you're downtown, somebody might have a thought about the way you're dressed, even though they're not paying for your clothes. The people here really can be nosy in your business and small town mentality. And I mean that to a large degree, possibly more than anywhere else in Florida. The older people in particular can be downright unbearable, and some of the younger people have learned the same ignorance from them. So out and about dealings with people can become very hesitant for somebody from a big city because you're constantly having to deal with their politicking local culture. I don't know what you could call it, but they're always trying to brush their beliefs, their ideologies in your face and trying to make you conform to the way they want to see things when it's none of their business. Keep in mind that Plant City is the hometown of Ashley Moody, so that should just give you an idea of the type of bigwig people who think they're big shots that are out here. These are the types of individuals who are soaked in self-righteousness and just consider themselves praiseworthy and better than other people. So you better have very thick skin if you're thinking about moving to this area, because many of the people here simply have some very self-entitled attitudes, and they simply believe that they're better than everybody else and that other people need to do things the way they want done. So that's one real serious downside that you're going to need to consider is the regional culture of this area being kind of next to Polk County. To give you an idea, the people are going to try to shove their conservative ideologies down your throat constantly, sometimes in scenarios where it isn't even called for. And keep in mind that this isn't a coastal beach vacation community. If you walk into a gas station here, there's going to be toilet paper on the ground, different color themes to the toilet, and just hygiene and cleanliness in general in this area isn't very high. You have a lot of farm workers, you have a lot of people live in mobile homes and just live like savages. So if you're using a public bathroom here, it is kind of a rural community. So do not expect hygiene to be exceptional in an area where most people are working in the fields or in agriculture. Interesting personal antic, I'm allergic to strawberries, and while I didn't get deathly sick today, I do have a strawberry allergy, and I can tell you that I kind of got a little bit sick today. These trucks right here are loading up with strawberries and sending them all over the USA. This is kind of the industry here. The area is also developing rapidly, so you're going to see a lot of very beautiful rural areas once you get off the major roads. But once you're in those major highways, please believe that this is the Florida corridor of traffic, and you better get used to seeing the back of other people's vehicles for hours on end. This is a busy part of the state of Florida. To summarize what we've learned today, one of the biggest cons of living in Plant City is that there seems to be a lot of rough neighborhoods and even a lot of gang-related activity. The positive is the beautiful and colorful Strawberry Festival, the fact that the area is surrounded by some of the most beautiful farmland in the state of Florida. The city has some of the most beautiful architecture you're going to find anywhere in Florida for a city its size, and traffic can be a real nightmare in this area. If you're looking for jobs, there's a lot of warehouse jobs, transportation jobs, and plenty of agriculture jobs. None of those jobs really equal extraordinarily high incomes. The locals can be a little click tight, and socially integrating yourself to Plant City may take a little bit of patience, if not outright difficulty. And of course, the biggest contradiction of all, a town that runs solely, if not mostly, on exploiting migrant workers while also expressing politically their hate for them. So that's kind of a little confusing. It's like biting the hand that feeds you practically. You know, back in the 70s, there was a time when Americans weren't so fragile and they actually went out there and worked in the fields. A lot of teenagers would work the fields to make extra money. After all, agricultural work is seasonal. It's not like it's a year-round occupation. It's just a time of the year when the local farmers could use a little extra help to put some food on the table. But many people today are just too fragile, their hands are too soft, their backs can't bend over. There was definitely a time when the woman had real men at home in the United States that went out in the fields and threw a basket on their shoulders and brought home a little bit of hard-earned, sweated money. But it seems like most guys today just want to drive in their fancy pickup trucks on leather seats and listen to Jason Aldean with their bumper stickers and t-shirt decals being rough and strong figures, but in reality being too soft to get their hands dirty. It's interesting to see a town where every guy drives a big pickup truck, but none of them have considered doing real man stuff like working in a field. Not throughout the whole year, not as a career occupation. But, you know, back in the 70s, if you were a woman, you'd want a man that could work in the field even if he didn't need to. There was just something about being manly and having, like, manly habits, like being able to work. Even if you have a more better education and you don't have to do it, the men back then in the 70s would do it just to let their wives know that they had a real man at home. But today, they just wear t-shirts, hats, and bumper stickers to let people know how masculine they are. And you know, parents too, because back then, kids used to have to buy their own beer, sort of say. Well, kids today want their daddy to buy them a $50,000 pickup truck when they graduate high school, even though they've never touched a basket or a strawberry outside of a freaking cupcake factory. Talking about cupcake factory, that's practically what people in this country have become. Because after all, if these people really cared about their country and really cared about their community, why don't they just all get together like they used to in the 70s and just help the farmers during that time of the year so that the fields could have, you know, the labor needed, and then you could have the food without having to exploit migrants. So anyways, that's the situation in this area. It's a little confusing how a community that depends on, exploiting migrant labor because their men have become too infertile to do it themselves. Yet all of a sudden the men want to proclaim that they're masculine by wearing a t-shirt and driving an F-350, even though they don't do the first thing that a man should do, which is work to provide for their family and their community so that they don't have to wear a bumper sticker or say they're masculine because, they're masculine because they're doing masculine things like working like a man. Either way, that's Plant City for you. A town that's definitely at the crossroads of a few contradictions, and it's going to have to figure out if it's going to continue its industry of agriculture or if it's going to become a huge cookie cutter community like everywhere else in Florida, even though it doesn't have beaches, but it already has the traffic like if it did have beaches. Definitely a town with some interesting contrast. That is Plant City, Florida in Hillsborough County, even though it kind of feels like it belongs in Polk County.